Hello, it's Monday. Welcome to the DSR Daily. I'm David Rothkopf, joined by Riley Fessler. Good morning, Riley.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Yeah, wake up. Let's get with the program. It's a new week. Great things are certainly going to happen. After all, they didn't happen last week. Well, some week they're going to happen, and Minna Stein will be there to talk about them. How are you doing today, Minna?
I'm happy to be here. How are you?
Happy to be here. We're all in this virtual space where we have free will and we have no strange leadership structure leading us down a dark path. Here in DSR land, it's all like it used to be. Flowers, birds singing. That's why Riley's always in good spirits. If only you could see his face the way I'm seeing it right now. What a sourpuss. Riley, what's wrong? I thought you were in New York all weekend. You were having a great time.
Yeah, it was a great weekend. I'm actually still in New York for the time being, but
Oh, you are?
heading back to DC this afternoon. Yeah.
Oh, party time! Party time for Riley. Well, I hope you enjoy New York before Andrew Cuomo takes over for Eric Adams. There's a story we're not going to cover today, but hey, New Yorkers, you can do better than that. There are rat kings on your very street who would be a better mayor than either Eric Adams or Andrew Cuomo.
What an incredible choice to be made there.
What an incredible choice for the greatest city in the world.
Gives me an excuse to break out my Andrew Cuomo impression.
What? You do an Andrew Cuomo impression?
All during the pandemic I did. And it's been a long time since I've got to use it. So
And how does
for
it
that
go?
reason alone, I'm
How does
excited.
it go? Let's go. Let's hear the impression.
What we're going to do with the vaccine. And that's the whole impression.
Wow.
But
Wow. That made me feel like this was an unsafe space to work in, so it worked.
that's the most important part.
Yeah, it really is. I was in the Clinton administration with him. He was pretty young. I was pretty young at the time. I know it's hard to believe. And so I was always, I was like, well, what's this dude doing here? But of course, he had a famous name. He was from a famous family. And he was the Secretary, I guess, of Housing and Urban Development. And so I would go around to people and say, well, so what's this dude like? And every single person said the same thing. He's the biggest asshole you will ever meet. And it was just like it was early on because he was like a prince. His father had been the governor, and his father was kind of a great man. And he thought he had inherited all of that, and behaved that way, and was awful to people. Anyway, that's the New York news. Riley, kick us off with something from around the world that will say, "Hey, it's a new week. Things are going better."
I've got bad news for you, David. The Kremlin has praised Donald Trump's...
I think we should rename this podcast. I've got bad news for you, David. Yeah, go on.
The Kremlin has praised Donald Trump's foreign policy shift, noting that it largely aligns with Russia's own vision, particularly regarding Ukraine.
What? Who knew that?
Yeah.
Who could have seen that coming for the past 8 years?
Both Russian officials and Trump himself have emphasized pragmatism and common sense in efforts to end the conflict, with Trump being described as a pragmatist focused on peace. Despite differences with Europe, Russian leaders believe that maintaining political will between Trump and Putin could lead to a successful rapprochement between the U.S. and Russia. Oh boy, just what we want.
Well, it must be what the American people want. The guy was elected. We found out he was deeply in bed with Russia. He was doing things for Russia. He was kissing Putin's ass. He didn't stop Putin. Remember, folks, Putin invaded Ukraine in 2014. Trump had from 2017 to 2021 to actually do something about it. He didn't do anything about it. Instead, he elevated Putin's interests. Every time somebody said, hey, you're a little close to Putin for comfort, he would say, Russia, this is, this is a hoax. Well, guess what? It's not a hoax. It was never a hoax. He was, for one reason or another, since the 80s, the dude has been fascinated by the Russians, drawn to the Russians, marrying people who were former who like his first wife Ivana's father was a member of the Communist Party and worked for the secret police. This guy is deeply involved with these people, actively sought the opportunity to advance their interests. And, I think we'll just take a moment here to point out that, as we'll show in a later moment, this is the changing direction in Ukraine. While a huge deal, is not the only thing he's done on Russia, right? He's, as we'll do a story in a little bit, on what he's doing to stand down our cyber defenses and cyber offensive capability against the Russians. He's shut down the part of the Treasury Department that tracked Russian oligarchs who were violating the law. He shut down the part of the Department of Homeland Security that stopped Russians from interfering in our elections. He put a Russia propagandist in head of the intelligence community. And she was on TV over the weekend, not willing to criticize Putin or blame Russia for the start of the war. There's another Russia propagandist who was doing similar things and attacking our allies, running the Department of Defense. Marco Rubio met with the Russians and said, let's do some new things with them. There's great opportunities to work together. Trump said he's talked to Putin, that they're going to have meetings together, that they're going to have state dinners and celebrate each other. And we're going to get Russia back into the G8. We have attacked our allies. We have attacked NATO and weakened NATO. We have launched trade wars against our allies. I could go on and on and on. The point is, this is not one thing. This is not just a bad meeting on Friday. This is a systematic effort that has shifted the United States effectively out of NATO, effectively away from our allies, and made us an ally of Russia. And that's not an exaggeration. We were once, as I wrote in a Substack, which I encourage you to go read, called Help Wanted, New Leader of the Free World. We were once the shining city on the hill, and we are now the Belarus of the West. We are just another supporter. We're not the leader even in this relationship. Trump is sort of sworn an oath of fealty to Putin, and we're now following them. They love it, as Riley just said. But you can go online. What are the Russians doing now? They're launching massive drone attacks against civilians, which are war crimes. If they're planning to do 500 of these a day. These are our allies now, folks. This is who America is lined up with. We are hand in hand with war criminals.
France and Britain are proposing a 1-month partial truce between Russia and Ukraine, focusing on halting air, sea, and energy infrastructure attacks while excluding ground combat, as stated by French President Emmanuel Macron and Foreign Minister Jean-Noel Barrot. This proposal aims to test Russian President Vladimir Putin's commitment to peace and pave the way for potential negotiations. Macron emphasized that European ground troops would only be deployed in a later phase, with no immediate plans for their presence in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Germany is considering significant defense and infrastructure funds, and EU leaders are preparing for an extraordinary summit to address additional support for Ukraine and European security.
Yeah, look, would it be great if there were some kind of temporary partial ceasefire to save some lives? It'd be great. Will the Russians honor it? No. Do the Russians have reasonable expectations? No. Do the Russians think they can get whatever they want because the United States is pulling away from Ukraine? Yes. Do we expect the United States to pull further away from Ukraine? There's talks that Trump may actually suspend all U.S. support for Ukraine as early as today. So, we think that these things make that situation more dangerous because they validate and empower Putin. as Riley was just talking about it. And I think that the Europeans are going to sort of get a wake-up call, and they're going to realize not only are they going to have to supply their own leader of the free world. And by the way, that's not my formulation. The person who said we need a new leader of the free world is Kaja Kallas, who's the foreign policy high commissioner within the European structure. She's effectively the Secretary of State of the EU. And she was the one who said we need a new leader of the free world. But what are they going to do? I suspect they're going to ramp up their aid and their support. They're not going to put boots on the ground, and Ukraine will continue to have to fight this war as they did before. Perhaps most significant in the announcements that came out of these European meetings over the weekend was that Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, said they'd agreed to using seized Russian assets to help fund Ukraine. That's concrete. Ukraine certainly needs it. Ukraine can use the money to help build up its own arms industry and its own self-sufficiency. But make no mistake, everybody got a wake-up call Friday. The situation in Ukraine has changed. The geopolitical situation has changed. And the United States of America, regardless of where you may think we ought to be, and 80% of Americans support Ukraine, the United States of America is now on the Russian side in that illegal war. Riley.
The administration has paused offensive cyber operations against Russia as part of diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine, according to officials. The directive issued by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to U.S. Cyber Command aims to de-escalate tensions and support negotiations, though its duration remains unclear. The pause raises concerns about the U.S. response to Russian cyber threats, such as hacking and election interference, and may impact operations supporting Ukraine's digital defenses.
Yeah, of course it will. Absolutely, of course it will. It's what I was talking about before. And this is only what's being reported. There's been a lot of controversy around this story. First, people said that they had stopped, planning for offensive operations. Then they said, well, no, we're pausing them. Maybe we'll continue some of them. But the point is, they're standing things down. The cases against Trump are being stood down. People who prosecuted him on the Russia issues are being harassed and are losing their clearances. This is changing things in ways that we're not even 100% sure of right now. If you did not on Friday take the time to listen to the emergency podcast that we did with Doug Lute, former ambassador to NATO, former U.S. Army 3-star general, Rosa Brooks, and Mark Polymeropoulos, former senior CIA operative, I strongly urge you to take the time to listen, because we get into that. But we're also going to do another podcast a little bit later today to deal with the dimension of it. What's the dimension we're dealing with today? It's the fact that if the United States has switched sides, that changes the strategic structure of the world. What do countries that thought that the U.S. might protect them from a Russian nuclear attack do now? Do other countries start getting nuclear weapons or building up their arsenals because they can't count on a U.S. defense? This carries over, as we talked about on Friday, into the intel community. How is the Five Eyes partnership that is sort of the bedrock of Western intelligence security going to work if people do not trust the United States, do not trust Trump, do not trust Tulsi Gabbard, do not trust Hegseth? And the answer is it's not. And so, there's no headline today saying Five Eyes is dead, but Five Eyes is in the ICU. It is dying. There may be some lip service paid to maintaining it. But if you think the best intelligence that our allies are getting, particularly on Russia, is going to this administration, I've got a bridge to sell you between Manhattan and Brooklyn. That's just not going to happen. And so this is not just a media reaction to a bad meeting. This is a sea change in the way the world works and a dramatic diminution in our security and safety, and a dramatic increase in the amount of risk that we will face in the months and years ahead. Minna?
U.S. District Judge Amy Berman Jackson ruled in favor of Hampton Dellinger, head of the Office of Special Counsel, in his lawsuit against the Trump administration over his firing, citing that such actions could undermine the protections for federal employees and whistleblowers. The decision removes procedural hurdles, reinforcing the legality of Dellinger's job protections, which Congress established to prevent arbitrary removal. While the Trump administration is appealing, the case may determine the president's authority to dismiss leaders at independent agencies.
We'll see. We're in an interesting area here, of course, because we, first of all, have to see how the courts rule all the way up to the Supreme Court. And then we have to see whether the administration actually listens to the courts. Because this administration has already launched campaigns saying that judges that rule against them are illegal, should be removed. And they're supported by MAGA on the Hill on that. And they're also saying we're not going to follow the rulings. So, for example, when the court said that the USAID funding shutdowns were illegal, they went right ahead and continued with them. Marco Rubio announced new ones. Sorry. So, and by the way, this morning, Trump was all enthusiastic on Truth Social, saying that a law that required people to report the beneficial ownership of shell companies would not be enforced. This is a law, and Trump has said, no, we're not going to follow this one. So in the new world unleashed by our Supreme Court, laws are just suggestions that a president may or may not follow and enforce at his own will. And that, of course, is not the rule of law that we are used to. That is not a nation of laws rather than men, as John Adams once referred to it. That is a king. It's just a king. You know, we will all scrabble along in our little lowly roles, and our representatives will pass laws, and then King Trump will determine which of those laws he will enforce, which he will break, which will allow his friends to break, and so forth. And there's a lot of that going on. I love the story over the weekend of some of the people at Doge clearing the way for, wait for it, a big contract for SpaceX. I mean, it's just unbelievably corrupt. They're using their power to enrich themselves, which is, stunning. Riley?
Israel faced international condemnation after halting all food and aid supplies to Gaza on Sunday, with mediators Egypt and Qatar accusing it of using starvation as a weapon in violation of humanitarian law. The move came as a fragile ceasefire, which had allowed increased aid into Gaza, ended its first phase, with Hamas accusing Israel of trying to derail negotiations for the second phase, which involves releasing hostages in exchange for a lasting ceasefire. The U.S. proposed extending the ceasefire through Ramadan and Passover, but Israel warned of additional consequences for Hamas if the truce isn't upheld.
Well, this is another country where they believe that where they might have gotten some pushback from the United States in the past for their behavior, they're not going to get any now. They're going to do whatever they want. The Israelis are going to do whatever they want. And we've seen that in the West Bank. We've seen it in Gaza. We've seen it in the neighborhood where they've gone into Syria recently on some military errand. And we can expect more of that. Trump can run all the videos of Trump casinos in Gaza that he wants. These actions by Israel will make the region less safe. They will undoubtedly violate the law and human rights of other people. And they're going to get away with it because the United States, which was once sort of at least a source of some pressure on them, that's now not in the picture. It's not in the equation. I had a conversation with somebody who had listened to a presentation by this guy Witkoff, who is their Middle East negotiator. And Witkoff, who's a real estate guy, sort of said, the thing about the Middle East is all the real estate's super undervalued because of all this political risk. So if we could reduce the political risk, there's a bunch of great real estate plays to be made in the Middle East. That's an interesting observation. It's not actually the thing about the Middle East. And it suggests a really kind of twisted way of looking at some of these complex historical, social, cultural, political, and economic challenges in the region. Well, that was a pretty exhausting way to start out the day. And frankly, I found it a little bit extra exhausting because I stayed up last night and watched every minute of the Academy Awards. Although the Academy Awards were I think there's a sign that they realize their audience is aging because they started at 7:00 at night. Why? So they could do, what was it? What followed it? Like American Idol or some kind of crazy bullshit. But it started at 7:00 at night. And I know, Minna, that you are you have your own podcast on films. And I'm wondering, what was your reaction?
I have kind of a hot movie take, which is 2024 bad year for movies. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's a real hot take.
There are obviously exceptions, right? Like Conclave,
Good movie.
Incredible movie.
Actually, a real movie. Totally
So good. I was rooting for Conclave in every category that they were nominated in. I thought the substance was great. Sing Sing is great. I just think that in general, most years, I'm really excited. I go see every movie that's nominated for Best Picture in the theater. I watch every award show leading up to the Oscars. I'm really in it. And this year I had to force myself to watch the movies nominated for Best Picture. And then I was looking back at the movies I did see in the last year, and I was like, these movies were horrible. Gladiator 2, Love Lies Bleeding, Madam Web came out this, just a really rough year for movies. So,
well, I know that Riley only watched Baby Girl over and over and over again, but
even that movie sucked.
And
that movie was real bad.
It was a real bad movie. Riley, did you watch any of the Academy Awards last night?
I watched the clips, but I've been trying to make my way through all the Best Picture nominees, and I haven't seen Conclave yet or The Brutalist, but I did see Anora, Amelia Perez, which was stunningly bad. One of the worst Bad Picture nominees in recent memory. I think Amelia Perez was really kind of the stain on this Oscar season in terms of the lead up, because everyone questioned why that movie was nominated for anything. Let alone Best Picture.
The reality is this. I got a hotter hot take than you, Minna, and you can jump on me for this. But if you're supposed to be giving out awards for achievement, if there is no film that hits the standard, don't give out the award. There was no Best Picture this year. There was no film that should have won Best Picture. And we're reminded when they give out awards for crappy movies that this is just a PR stunt. It's just something that was created by the movie industry to make people feel like movies were special and, to get people to go out and see movies that had already been released. And we're all a bunch of goons who watch this because we're sitting there going, oh, achievement in sound editing. Oh, my God, that's so great. Or, set decoration. Those set decorators, they're really important. And they're not. We don't do that for any other industry. But let's set all that aside. These movies aren't the best movies. These movies not only do not measure up to the best movies of past years, they don't measure up to the best movies of last year, because the best movies of last year appeared in other media, right? There is no picture on the Best Picture list that was as good as Shogun. There was not a single picture that was as good as any individual episode of Shogun in terms of writing, in terms of acting, in terms of cinematography. And so, the reality is that the medium has left this little slice of the industry behind. And when Sean Baker, isn't that his name, who was the director of Anora, gets up and he reads a speech about go to the movies, go out to the theaters. I love going to movie theaters. I would go to the movies alone on a Saturday by myself to watch 3 or 4 movies. I would slip from multiplex to watch other movies. I watch movies every single day. I'm not exaggerating. Every single day. Last night I watched It Happened One Night. Talk about a movie that won Best Picture. And
Great movie,
right? But these movies aren't good enough to get me to go to the fucking theater. And I love it. And so don't blame me. Don't blame COVID. Blame the fact that you're producing crappy, small, not interesting movies. If you do something that's worth showing up at the theater, I'll show up at the theater. But it's not my fault, Sean. It's your fault. Okay, that's my.
with the exception of Conclave.
No, but Conclave was like a good movie. It had a
so good.
structure, a beginning, a middle, and an end. There were good actors. It was, the twist at the end.
And it was just like
the twist at the end was stupid.
Well, the whole movie was just like petty drama. I loved it. It was so good. They were just like digging up dirt on each other and then exposing each other's secrets. I loved it. And listen, I'm the same way. Like, I go to the movies by myself all the time. I'm actually going to the movies tonight by myself to see Anora, which I never saw and it won Best Picture. So I'm like, I guess I should go see it. But my friend and I had joked that this year's Oscars should have been dedicated to correcting mistakes of previous year's Oscars. So anyone or any movie that didn't get an award should have been up for Best Picture or Best Actor or whatever tonight. And we should have just forgotten about all of the movies from the past year. But I don't know. I was just really disappointed, and I wasn't sure how Emilia Perez and that whole controversy was going to throw things off last night. I kind of thought it was going to get really crazy and like weird things were going to win and people weren't going to know what to vote for. But no, it was just a predictable, regular year. And I think what upsets me more than what you're talking about is that I get frustrated by one movie sweeping every category. And that happens every year. And I'm growing increasingly frustrated with it because it doesn't really seem like a celebration of movies to me. It seems like a celebration of one movie. And I think that the Academy and the voters should do a better job of saying, okay, Anora was the best picture overall, or Parasite was the best picture overall, but this movie had great cinematography, so let's celebrate that. And this movie had a great actress, let's celebrate her. I hate how one movie just wins every award. It's like, I'm just wasting my time. Someone could have just told me Anora's great, and I would have been cool, and we didn't have to do the Oscars.
Okay, first of all, Anora's not great. Anora's fine. Anora's okay. Okay, it's a small movie like his other small movies, and he's not a bad movie maker for an indie movie maker. But Parasite, which you mentioned, is a movie that deserved all the accolades it got. Parasite.
Agree. I just chose a random movie that had won Best Picture.
But what I'm saying is, each year there are movies that stand out. And they stand out because years later you look back at them and you say they're good. There are also, Crash won Best Picture. That was a piece of shit. Forrest Gump won all these awards. Forrest Gump is one of the worst, stupidest movies ever made.
I agree.
And Riley's like, what? Forrest Gump? I like Forrest Gump. No. Riley, you're being very quiet through all of this.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I liked, of the movies I saw this year, of the Best Picture nominees, I liked Anora, but it didn't knock my socks off. I mean, like, my favorite was Dune Part 2, in terms of that's a movie that actually also got people in theaters and excited to go to the movies.
I just will not see Timothée do anything. Timothée, he just rubs me the wrong way. And frankly, I like Zendaya. I think she's cool. And her movie, the tennis movie, was better than half of these movies.
I forgot that even came out this year.
Yeah. But I understand what you're saying about Dune 2, though, because it was big. It had scope. It was something would be better to watch on a large screen than watch on a small screen. There's nothing about Anora, nothing that would make you feel like, oh, I need to see this on a
Yeah.
big screen. It was, and yeah, he's like, well, it's a communal experience. It builds our community. Give me a fucking break. The community will show up if you create something that's worth their while to show up. And I'll give you an example. And now I'm going to reveal my complete like nerdiness about what we do here. Okay, we watched this entire award ceremony. There was probably 4 minutes of references to the world we live in during the award ceremony. Conan O'Brien had a funny Honora joke about standing up to a Russian. Daryl Hannah almost said Slava Ukraini correctly. Couldn't quite get it out of her mouth correctly, but at least she had the sentiment. Zoe Saldana made a nice comment about immigrants and being an immigrant coming from the Dominican Republic. But most of these movies had nothing the fuck to do with the world we live in. The Apprentice, I mean, it was fine, but it was a cartoon. But we live in a world where everything is going to hell. Why am I not seeing artists use their artistry to mobilize people, to put these issues under focus? I suspect the people involved with Emilia Perez would say they were doing that. But it was such an incoherent mismatch of lunacy that it didn't have any effect. Let's get people to use these tools to talk about life the way it is. The United States is fucking falling apart at the seams. Our freedoms are being taken away, and we're having a debate about, I don't know whether or not Honora correctly represents the fate of sex workers. I mean, I care, but on the list of concerns I've got right now, it's not in the top 10,000. I don't know. Sorry, I'm very ranty this morning.
I hear you. It was a disappointing Oscars.
And it was like the production, Conan.
Conan's
blah.
great.
It was fine. He did fine. It's like, Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan, yeah, they were in a movie together. Should those two people be giving out the Best Picture award? You got to be fucking kidding me.
Billy Crystal, fine, but Meg Ryan, I wasn't really sure why she was there. I guess because they were in a commercial together recently, but that doesn't really seem like good enough to
a commercial making fun of their prior
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like there was more good movie making in the 10 seconds of In Memoriam for Gene Hackman than there was during the entire night. And I know they're going to say, boomer. We've heard enough. But Minna's not a boomer.
I'm not, and I was disappointed as well. So this year, 2025, seems like there's going to be good movies coming out this year. So let's hope this year is better than last year.
Okay, what's the good movie?
Sorry?
What good movie is coming out?
Coming out this year?
Yeah.
Oh, off the top of my head? Great question. But can I tell you by looking it up? Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And Riley, this obviously didn't get you as wound up as it got us wound up, but
No. Nosferatu didn't get that many nominations, so I wasn't that excited either.
Did you like Nosferatu?
I love Nosferatu.
Did you see the original Nosferatu?
No, I haven't seen that or the...
Go on.
I haven't seen the original or the Werner Herzog version either.
Yeah, the Werner Herzog version was garbage. The original version of Nosferatu, excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
And at least Werner Herzog had the advantage. He's insane. Werner Herzog, he's like an insane artist. It's at least a little interesting to see what's going on in the mind of an insane person. But the original Nosferatu from whatever it was, 1920, whatever, 30, whatever, that is as creepy a movie as you will ever see. Anyway, Minna, wrap us up here with something we can look forward to.
Yes, I was going to say, I actually saw a pre-screening of this movie. Bong Joon-ho's new movie comes out this year, Mickey 17, and I already saw it and it was excellent, so I would recommend it.
That comes out Friday, right?
Following, this is his next movie following Parasite, which we also mentioned earlier, so would recommend.
I gotta say, the fact that Riley knew it came out Friday, I'm just stunned.
I see lots of movies. I got my Regal Unlimited. I go like 3 times a month.
Yeah, and Washington is mourning the death of another movie theater.
That's what I was going to say.
Landmark E Street.
I saw the pre-screening of Mickey 17 at E Street, and then they announced that it was closing the next day. It was pretty sad.
You get it all from us here on the DSR Daily. We give you everything you need to know, but we try not to take up too much of your time. So we will go off and do our thing today. Please do listen to our special episode on the new Trump doctrine of loving Russia and what that means for nukes and world security. It's going to be a bit scary. You may want to pour yourself an adult drink before you listen to it. But our friends John Wolfstall and Joe Cirincione are going to come in, and that should be up around the middle of today. And each and every day this week, we're going to do new stuff dealing with this new world in which we're in. Please join us for that, including right here, back at the DSR Daily, tomorrow, whenever you listen to this. Until then, thanks, Riley. Come back home. Thanks, Minna. Good luck, everybody. Bye-bye.